And we're ready for our Q&A session. So I'm going to read for those in disadvantage. This is being web streamed. So for Ignacio Criado, it says, what kind of big data analysis is being attempted for the administration in Spain for tourism? How do you differ it? How are they different from the uses being given in Latin America? And for Fabien, the question is, first I'll start with the questions, and we'll see the answers. All right? Okay, for Fabian, how can you avoid bias in econometric models with restricted search volumes? What are the limits of using insignificant, statistically insignificant data samples? And my question would be, what data do you use for your time series? Could you elaborate on this? And for Andrew, usar monomiales y polinomiales tiene un efecto en la búsqueda. You got both in Spanish and English. Okay. Does using monomials and polynomials in the words has an effect on the search? And how can we simplify the use of filters for processing information? Three more questions from the public. Okay, you raise your hand in the back, please. My question is for Eduardo Clark. Yesterday from the INEGI, they asked a question which I think is quite relevant with regards to open data, and it was the following. What's must know and nice to know and need to know? Because thinking of data generated by the postal server, we have real-time information of our mailmen who cover the entire radius of the Earth 3 times a day. So this may be useful strategically, but when it comes to natural disasters, our routes are important because we can deliver goods or aid quickly because we cover the entire country. So this nice to know and need to know. It would be good to have guidelines from the presidency because the INEGI has a census, but we day by day receive information on different towns being built in the country or settlements. So in the INEGI, you can see these settlements during the census, but we have information in real time of when somebody calls us and says, oh, we need a zip code because I have a new settlement. So this would be useful, and how do I know who we work together with? Because in the email, we don't have this. Yes? Juan Munoz from the INEGI. The question is also for Eduardo. In the website for sharing open data, are you considering the application of, well, you have one SMX, which allows you to send together with the metadata to truly interpret this. It's hard for the population who doesn't have information on the data how to use them correctly. This standard allows you this. It's supported by organisms throughout the world. We have the UN, World Bank, IMF, etc. The question is, do you plan on incorporating these standards in the application so the user can better take advantage of the information. Do you have any question? Álvaro Villagra from Diego Group. I wanted to ask you, especially Ignacio, about open data. Do we need to make any constitutional or legal changes to our laws to ensure that government behavior with regards to open data and that of organizations as well become that we generate a way of behaving with regards to different of the information that's different, not only here but in the entire world, particularly in Latin America, because there's an intention. We have these forums. However, I think there's little information and that people know little of these efforts, even though we speak of this. I think there's a small elite who is aware of the situation. Is this possible? Um, can you answer this? Thank you for the question. This is Juan Carlos Sanchez Salina from the Ministry of Tourism. So we don't know if for other sectors we're doing big data analysis. I know there's a study on the use of big data in Spain a month or it was published about a month ago, and we analyzed things such as the number of days or nights spent in hotels in different cities, how much they spend per capita, tourists. So there's a massive use of the data provided by hotel owners to the authorities. We've had Telefónica participate as well, so there's a will on behalf of private companies to develop and promote this sector, which is particularly important in a country such as Europe, which is the second that receives most tourists in the world. So I think we are making the best, we're making good steps forward. So with regards to constitutional changes, I think I agree in this diagnostic in the sense that many of us have to do with open data, open government. They are the will of government. So we were speaking of the Alliance for Open Government, includes more than 60 countries. The Initiative for Open Government, it's completely well, it's at will. It's not compulsory, and commitments are also acquired voluntarily, and open data processes are, yes, unequal in their development, and this is something we see in the context of well, depending on the political will of the people responsible in the government, we're reaching different levels of advancement here. Since most citizens are unaware of this, it would be important that in one way or another we were able to link governments, whether whether by proposing reforms or voting against them, so these policies pass from being an axis of government action and state policies. So there is effectively an issue of diagnosis. Bueno, se hicieron un par de preguntas y la primera era si usar polinomiales afecta los resultados. Y que, bueno, hay dos interpretaciones y la respuesta a ambas es interesante y lo contestaré de acuerdo con ambas. Primero, por polinomiales se refiere a ingrams o ingrams, bueno, en lugar de ver una secuencia de palabras. A ver, me voy a quitar esto. En este caso vale la pena ver frases multipalabras porque la mayoría de las frases son ambiguas tanto en inglés como en español. Por ejemplo, en una palabra como jugar a veces se relaciona con algo positivo, puede ser juego como juego de niños o, o que estás jugando, bueno, o que estás reproduciendo una película o que te jugaron, en inglés significa que te estafaron, entonces te da un poco más de contexto. Bueno, comenzamos inicialmente usando palabras sencillas como parte de un análisis y estar enfermo tenía que ver con neurosis y conforme empezamos a usar las palabras estar enfermo de significa estar harto de en inglés. Entonces nos dimos cuenta que era diferente, no tenían gripe, estaban hartos, están ya hartos de... Bueno, para cuantificar este efecto no es tan fuerte para predicción, entonces usar frases de multipalabras en lugar de palabras individuales. Yo quiero, como ingeniero computacional, usar eh, aplicaciones más complejas. Para personalidad creo que podría ser cambio en 2%, 3% en precisión. Depende de lo que veas, lo que buscas. Para otras posibilidades de predicción no tiene tanta diferencia. La otra interpretación sobre polinomiales tiene que ver con modelación polinomial usando ecuación de polinomio o los que conocen aprendizaje por máquina, aún una relación no lineal, y nos parece que las relaciones lineares con esto usando regresión lineal o un SVM, una máquina de apoyo vectorial, bueno, que eso es suficiente y más rápido que usar un modelaje de polinomio. La segunda pregunta tiene que ver con simplificar los filtros de la información, así que es un punto importante del que no hablé en mi presentación, pero cuando estamos viendo 1.000 millones de tweets, posible que haya 10 millones de palabras únicas y no van a importar, la mayoría de ellos no vas a obtener mucha información sobre ellos, no se usan lo suficiente. Entonces uno de los mejores filtros es eliminar palabras infrecuentes. Uno que usamos es si es a nivel del análisis individual, 1% de las personas deben mencionarlo para considerarlo. A nivel condado es un poco más, perdón, al nivel conteo son los 50.000 principales, depende del número de observaciones sobre cómo lo filtramos. Y luego, reducción de dimensionalidad también es importante cuando tienes tantas características y otros tipos de penalizaciones que buscan o tienen que ver con no sobrepasar tus datos. Puedes predecir tus datos de capacitación si tienes 2.000 conteos y 50.000 características. Sin embargo, cuando aplicas este modelo a nuevos conteos, no los va a predecir muy bien, y esto es un problema que se llama overfitting, y la reducción de dimensionalidad es importante, y también hay técnicas de regularización importantes para evitar el overfitting. Gracias, Andrew. Okay, the first question here. What we want with this strategy is for the nice to know and need to know to not be as important. If data has to be public, it should be public, so we decide if we're going to use it or not, because for one person something may be very useful, and for one person thinks something can be useless, and for another person it can be very useful. And the point of this initiative is to take advantage of what is already being done. Many of the government agencies generate information that would be of great importance for them or for other agencies, and they're not even aware that they exist. So we want to generate a catalog so everyone can know what we have, and you can check it by granularity, by agency, and use it for whatever you need. And the reason why you probably are not aware of what we're doing yet is that we're going agency by agency, and we're going 15 agencies per 6 weeks. So within a year or two, we will reach the entire number of government agencies. However, it's difficult because you need to train the liaisons so they deliver the data according to regulations of the system. So it's a slow implementation process, but hopefully it will bear fruits very soon, at least in a couple of years. So the question by INEGI, yes, the most important thing is that INEGI participates in our technical board, and where we determine what characteristics open data must have to qualify as open data and that they may form part of our catalog. It's important that our data is associated to metadata so we don't have losses in interpretation. Formats in which the data is released, well, we're supporting an open source initiative. Almost every small database will be CSV in, well, small in a certain sense in CSV. Geospatial vectors will be KML, which is what that Google likes, so people can add it to their Google Earth layers, and larger databases will be using Postgre maybe. But we're working very closely with the INEGI to ensure that there's a general consensus on what we want and that the data may remain and that people may understand them, and well, today and always. Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you. First, well, I wanted to add a comment to Ignacio's response on big data analysis in the sector of tourism in Spain, because Google collaborated with a couple of them. The first is a paper published by the Bank of Spain, by Concertora, and well, someone else, I don't remember his name. Basically, well, tourism is very important in Spain. It's 10% of the GDP or close to this. So the Bank of Spain was very interested in this, and they attempted to predict the arrival of British tourists to Spain. And well, the database is ideal for this because, as you may imagine, people conduct tourism searches 2 months before the trip. And they did find, depending on the models, the data result, but was very interesting. So I think this is an important paper or an interesting paper to read. And the other is in the same spirit. We did this with the BBVA Bank, and it was for forecasting in the tourism sector. You can read it online as well. The question I wanted to ask, well, the question I was asked had to do with estimate bias and volume of samples. From a perspective of volume, the volume of data we handle is huge. I didn't say this during the presentation, but the conclusion you can read from the Google Trends sample is a small amount of the process of the data we process. So volume isn't the problem in itself, it's whether this volume is representative of a larger universe in the country. And this varies depending on the level of penetration of internet, which, well, if we see European countries, it's above 70%. In some Scandinavian countries, it's over 90%. And in countries such as Mexico, it's 50%. Colombia, similar.
So it depends a bit on the country, the geographic area, and the problem being studied. Because if we are only concerned about um, forecasting, our idea is is to have better forecasts. I'm not interested in a particular ratio. However, if we're interested in particular ratios about a particular search index or causality matters, then we do have to be careful, but that is not very specific for this type of data. It is a problem that is often found in econometrics. And well, being very aware and having eyes open as investigators and applying some of the techniques that Andrew discussed. For example, trying to attempt adjustments out of the of the sample or obtaining objective benchmarks through surveys or other methods to ensure that we are actually seeing what we think we're seeing. Well, thank you very much. We have time. Some say we don't, some say we do, and some are kind of sneaking out. But we do have questions from the people outside of the room, and then I will give the floor to people inside the room. For Eduardo Clark. He is very popular. And well, how can we define information hierarchy? If it is open data, shouldn't we define the hierarchy based on the users? That is from Juan Carlos. Mark is from the Ministry of Tourism. I do not know if I am, well, if I should not say that, but also for Eduardo Clark, why have you chosen Creative Commons as licensing and for the public policies of the government? Does this not promote legal uncertainty? Alfonso Elizarraras from Infotech asks that question, and for Fabian from Victor Patiño from the government of the state of Aguascalientes, he asks: Is there any guidelines or is there any catalog to get to know what are Google's programs that could help us to make the most out of that information? Let me take three more questions. 1, 2, and 3 from the gentleman over there. I do not know if there is a microphone available for them. That is especially for the people that are out of the room. Reinaldo Treviño from INEGI Planning. I would just like to ask, how does the Mexican government think of empowering the population so that the population can really use the open data that will be published by the government? How do they intend to do that so that the relevant or current public policies can be assessed? Please, sir. Gracias. No, de las Naciones Unidas. Gracias a todos los presentadores. Mi pregunta, primero que nada, tiene que ver con los datos abiertos para Eduardo e Ignacio al respecto del modelo financiero que se encuentra detrás de los datos abiertos. ¿Cómo se sostienen los datos abiertos desde una perspectiva gubernamental? Existe la idea general de que esto va a generar dinero, pero no sé cómo esto podría retroalimentarse. ¿A quiénes producen la información? Esa es mi pregunta y quizá Google quiera decir algo sobre el modelo también. Después tengo dos preguntas muy breves. Una por Fabián al respecto de Google, las correlaciones de Google. Solo quería saber cómo combinan los conjuntos de datos, en qué unidades donde en realidad se hace la correlación. Y un poco en el mismo sentido hacia Andrew, la unidad que están haciendo el análisis es a nivel de condado. ¿Qué tan homogéneos son los condados? En Estados Unidos sé que algunos condados pueden ser muy grandes y no sé si en el análisis ustedes han pensado en obtener información más granular o datos más granulares en el análisis. Please, sir. Yes, sir. My name is Alberto Garcia from the Ministry of Tourism. We are very interested on this topic because we're launching a statistics portal, and there are different ways in which we're showing information. We have visors, statistical maps, we have an open data model, and and we really want to be up to date in terms of tourism statistics. One of the big challenges we are facing in the sector has to do with mobility. For tourism, it will be easy to identify flows, but the important challenge has to do with the domestic side. We know that there are three large emission centers, Guadalajara, Monterrey, and Mexico City, but there are many others that could contribute with information for which we do not have clear sources or precise sources. So through big data, we're trying to know what we could use. My question is for Fabian, for Eduardo. For Fabian, does Google have any tools that could make mobility easier domestically, whatever the topic is, but about mobility? And with Eduardo, we were asking how can we how can we obtain that mobility data? And we were thinking about the information that cell phone operators could give us in terms of roaming. And we do want to knock on the doors of the operators and have them join us. What would be the mechanisms for us to approach these three large operators and find out if they can give us a basis of mobility to have better information about this? So let us begin the other way around. Let us begin with Fabian, please. Well, thank you for your questions. All of them were very interesting. Something that we got from Victor was where can all programs might be found, where Google's programs might be found. One is the Google Research blog, where we publish the results of all our research. So that is for on the side of research, and the second side for development would be google.org. That would be our organization to improve well-being. So there are these two sides. I'll go to English for Ronald's questions. El modelo de finanzas, desde una perspectiva de Google, toda esta cuestión de Big Data nos llega muy directo a nosotros, solamente por organizar la información y las palabras para hacerla universalmente disponible. Esta es en realidad nuestra filosofía, incluso si no hay un beneficio monetario directo, como por ejemplo cuando liberamos Google Trends o cosas como Google Correlate. Estamos contentos de darle eso a los demás porque eso es parte de quienes somos. Pero en cuanto al lado público de los datos abiertos, me da mucha curiosidad las respuestas de Eduardo e Ignacio, pero en realidad esto es en lo que estamos pensando, en el tipo de asociación públicas y privadas que buscamos establecer ahí. En cuanto a Google Correlate, son flexibles las unidades en las que se hacen las correlaciones y esto depende del tiempo y el espacio. Sí, eso es Google Trends y esto estaba considerando principalmente a los Estados Unidos. Sí, lo siento, fui muy específico, pero había una correlación entre Hangover y algo. Anteriormente, tienen dos conjuntos de datos que pudieron correlacionar y estaban manteniendo quizá las direcciones IP para alguien que está enviando esa información para poder correlacionar estos conjuntos de datos. No fue a nivel individual, fue a nivel agregado. El de perder peso o algo por el estilo. Sí, a nivel agregado, en realidad depende del usuario. Con un gran poder, con una enorme capacidad y una enorme responsabilidad y una enorme posibilidad de cometer grandes errores. And finally, the last question about mobility. We do not have any tools available at this time on that field, but we're rolling stuff out continuously. And beginning with the questions from out of the room, the data hierarchy, how do we choose it? We were reviewing which agencies were more open to running these pilots to start releasing data. So our bosses were, trying to scout out a bit to find out who could be our strategic partners within government, and that in connection to the large databases we knew existed and that we wanted to make transparent. So it was a combination of what is important for the user and how feasible it is to start doing this at the short term, at least for a pilot. As I said before, we expect is that in 20 years this exercise will be replicated throughout the federal government. However, now we had to focus on what can be done at this time. We were trying to find databases that were closer to open data than to less structured data that would need a lot of cleaning in order to establish the priority. Out of Creative Commons, why have you chosen Creative Commons as a license of public policies from the federal government? Does not this drive us away from the federal law of copyright, and doesn't this undermine legal certainty? Well, Creative Commons, when it was decided to be launched, Mexican law had nothing to do with Creative Commons, but it is something that we decided that was the way we wanted to move forward, especially because this will be a use standard that will not only apply to Mexico City, but also to users outside of Mexico. I am not so sure about the legal subtleties why Creative Commons was chosen, but the idea was to make it more diverse and multinational according to the standards. So something else that is part of our responsibility as a data repository is how to make people use the data. Because you at INEGI will probably know that you have a massive amount of data, and there are a lot of catalogs that that is enormous, and it is information that could be powerful for different individuals in order to obtain information about the situation of our country and even to improve it. One of the initiatives in our data website is to develop interactive tools for all our catalogs, or most of them. As I said before, there's the layer of the catalog with microdata at the lowest level available. However, all these data, since these are in formats that are readable by machines, then they can be added to other components. So what we have in place is a series of maps to which we can upload layers of all topics. We can make graphs of the variables and make it more accessible for the user, so that the user, without having to download all the information, can explore it visually. And we expect that through communication, we want people to have access to this tool, even if they have a very small doubt about the way in which the government operates that is expressed in the data. This website will also have a sort of blog for the data for the data that will be launched at mid-June. There will be some made by the agency here for external or by third parties to tell us a story about that particular data. For example, the story we have right now is Conago, for example. They will be launching their growth estimations for different groups to the future alongside the catalog of schools that CEP will be releasing. We want to know where new schools will be needed based on the projections of economic growth. These are concepts, short stories about what can be done, because there are people that can use it, and very valuable information might be obtained. I think it is what will be done is very important and also very valuable. But I also wanted to know if you want to have an impact on the educational sector with a course or a subject or something that can make that even from childhood people can learn how important data is, how can the data be interpreted, and how could it be achieved through this interpretation to have an impact on the assessment of government public policy, and even getting to discuss possible design features for new public policy. Well, that is something that actually is outside of the scope of my responsibility, but that is something we would have to look at in the future, especially because this is one of the first generations that have a much more fluent knowledge of information systems, for example, in terms of data. Probably 10 years ago, the people that had, or the people that now is 18, 10 years ago did not know anything at all about how to do with those systems. But digital literacy is making people to interact with this more constantly. That is something that should be done, but I couldn't say what is being done right now specifically. I know that there are um, many initiatives out of the government to try to indoctrinate. Well, not to raise awareness about this. I know that Google has programs to teach young children to code, and if that grows, that could be very important in the future. However, still, there is a serious apathy for data in our country. When I go and I discuss open data, that is nothing. That is not something that sounds very sexy to a lot of people. Open data, what for? That is something that will hopefully change because most of the government's activities are expressed in data. Not only to develop it, but also to understand how it works, is something that could be facilitated by having open access to data. Bien, en cuanto a la pregunta de las Naciones Unidas, voy a cambiar al inglés por un momento. El financiamiento es un problema, especialmente porque en la oficina de la presidencia no tenemos un presupuesto preciso en cuanto a las acciones, pero lo que queremos es apostar al futuro, saber que los datos tienen la oportunidad de generar mucho valor agregado en el futuro. Entonces lo estamos haciendo como un tanto como una inversión, incluso si no estamos haciendo dinero en este momento, e incluso si estamos gastando dinero en esto, consideramos que es una estrategia que deberemos seguir, particularmente porque la mayor parte de esta información es información que ya se ha hecho. No estamos instalando nuevos sistemas para hacer información nueva. La mayor parte de la información que estamos tratando de hacer pública es información que ya se ha elaborado, para las cuales ya se han asignado presupuestos y que se ha utilizado para muchas cosas distintas. Lo único es que las personas no saben que existe, no saben cómo accesarlo, no saben que pueden tener acceso a esa información. En cuanto a financiamiento, el tema del financiamiento en este momento, en realidad es para obtener el sistema, enseñar a las personas que tienen la información cómo poderlo introducir a un sistema y esperar que lo utilicen, que el gobierno mismo también lo utilice para poder mejorar su trabajo. As I was going to say that with tourism, we're actually working with Manuel Lich, Pedro Lich, precisely. Yes, that is one of an important area of opportunity because tourism is one of those agencies that is doing what we want, data to be used for. And the previous model, or under the model that still prevails in Mexico, a lot of these agencies do not know that what others have even access is not easy for them. It is necessary to send a memo to the general manager to have authorization to obtain the data. And the idea behind this website is that this data, is that then somebody from a different agency knows what another agency is doing without having to go through the entire bureaucratic apparatus to obtain that. Sorry, you were interrupted. Thank you, Eduardo. I am sure you will have more questions to answer. Sobre la pregunta de las unidades de análisis, el análisis que presentamos el día de hoy, para esto utilizamos el nivel de condado porque, bueno, principalmente como producto de la información de satisfacción de la vida que teníamos disponible, y este estaba el nivel más bajo el que se agregó fue el nivel de condado, y lo mismo sucede con la información de enfermedades cardíacas. Esta se agregó al nivel de condado también, aunque hay otras opciones. Desde luego hemos explorado diferentes tipos de áreas estadísticas que utiliza el censo, y también esperamos obtener una llegar a un nivel más fino, probablemente a nivel de código postal o incluso más allá de eso. Hay algunas limitaciones en cuanto al uso de Twitter para poder llegar a este nivel. Una de ellas es que la información que ellos liberan para esta investigación solamente es el 1% de la información que reciben, y al llegar a un nivel todavía más fino no hay suficiente información, especialmente para hacer un rastreo con en el tiempo. Esperamos tener una muestra más amplia de ellos, pero aún estamos trabajando en eso. También la mayor parte de los tweets no están geolocalizados. De hecho, no entré a este tema, pero tenemos un proceso sofisticado para tomar los campos de respuesta de las personas para poder mapearlos con su ubicación. Pero mientras llegamos a un nivel más pequeño, como por ejemplo hacer que las personas puedan poner su edad, su dirección, entonces podríamos llegar más lejos, pero otros contestan, por ejemplo, diciendo en qué ciudad viven. Para responder, la investigación estatal anterior fue a nivel estatal, entonces tenemos que ir más allá de 50 puntos de datos hacia aproximadamente 2000. Y después solamente quería mencionar que nuestra infraestructura de código bueno, la manera en la que están diseñada puede manejar cualquier unidad de análisis, esencialmente una persona, una ubicación o un periodo de tiempo. La manera en la que lo hemos configurado es esa. También esta es nuestra infraestructura, pero también estamos buscando liberarlo como un conjunto de herramientas. Tenemos un financiamiento de la Fundación Templeton. Lo que buscamos hacer con eso es poder liberar o lanzar una suite de herramientas computacionales y de programación diseñadas para poder entender mejor estas mediciones, para que las personas que hacen estas mediciones lo puedan entender mejor. Entienden un correo en 6 meses. En los 6 meses yo les puedo dar más información, y eso me mantendrá motivado para continuar hacia adelante. En cuanto a la información de movilidad de la que una persona de la Secretaría de Turismo preguntó, podrían considerar también ver las redes sociales para obtener esta información. Solamente la cantidad de posts que vienen de diferentes zonas pueden ayudar a saber, a tener información de esto. Las personas, por ejemplo, también hablan de los lugares a los que van, de los lugares a los que van a visitar y cosas de ese tipo. Yes, Ignacio. If you'll allow me, I'll go into the concept of Creative Commons, the use of Creative Commons licensing. That is a very relevant topic in the sense that at the international level, Creative Commons licensing, and just to dispel the doubts that exist around this matter, governments and public administrations that have somehow validating or carrying or participating in this process of information sharing and open data are resorting to Creative Commons license to provide the contents of their websites, to start to break away from the model of copyrights that limits the sharing of contents produced by public administration. And then I would like to ask Eduardo, and I do not know if it is possible to engage in a conversation here. I would like to ask, what is the type of Creative Commons licenses you are thinking of? Because there are very different ways of Creative Commons licenses. And if we were to discuss open data, and that was some of the aspects that I covered in my presentation, the data of this, the information from these data repositories should be readily available for citizens of our companies in the most open way possible, so that if a Creative Commons license is used, it would be necessary to use that one or those that can somehow provide the better opportunities to reuse the information and to make it available for the citizenry and for the companies. You were saying that you did not have, that you do not know about the legal subtleties. Yes, I would not be able to answer that, but I assure you that we're doing it with that intent. I couldn't say specifically what is the type of license, but the purpose of the initiative is to make the information fully open, that a person can download the information and have no restrictions whatsoever on using them, reusing them, or even using them for commercial purposes. And this would have Eso tiene que ver también con el modelo financiero de los datos abiertos en ese sentido. Y tengo que decir algo en relación con el sector público. Yo creo que en esta área específica la cuestión es que la administración pública genera valor público cuando el gobierno abre la información y específicamente cuando en la información se está promoviendo la transparencia, la participación, cuando se promueve la colaboración con otras organizaciones y estos valores son muy buenos en términos de la reducción de la corrupción, la creación de la colaboración con la sociedad. Y ese es el modelo financiero del sector eh, privado. Hay una atmósfera y un ecosistema de compañías que puede ser ser información de la administración pública y algunos gobiernos están creando un sector específico orientado a desarrollar el proceso económico de la información pública, creando nuevos servicios que después las compañías pueden vender para crear nuevas oportunidades sociales y al final, bueno, esa es la manera para el sector privado, para la administración pública, se está generando valor con la información abierta y al mismo tiempo se está colaborando con las compañías para poder crear un nuevo sector empresarial con la explotación de la información de la administración pública. Well, thank you very much. We are informed that we need to use all the time we have, all the way until 2 p.m. No, I'm joking. We will take another round of questions and answers because I see that there's a lot of interest and take advantage of the effort made by Infotech to bring these speakers. Well, thank you and congratulations to all panelists for their great interventions. I just would like to supplement the response of Eduardo Clark, my colleague from Open Data. I'm Gabriela Segovia from IFAI, the Federal Institute for Information Access. This is something we have discussed with our colleagues from the National Policy of Open Data. And in reality, we are moving away from the issue of property, intellectual property, because the principle is that all the information that is in the hands of the government is public in principle, and the public is not only entitled to have access to such information, but also to reuse it. And for commercial, national security reasons or economic security reasons, that some of that information is reserved for a certain amount of time. It is a matter of waiting rights to take care of the privacy of personal data. So the licenses do not really relate to intellectual property. It has to do a lot more with use. Our open data colleagues are concerned that it remains published, that the information has certain features, because out of that information, business can be made. So there is an issue of reliability and the permanence of information. It has to do a lot more with uses. And now regarding the question asked by our colleagues of INEGI about reuse. The reuse of data is a challenge throughout the world. At IFAI, we have been analyzing it, and what we have found in public education now on textbooks has to do with awareness. Make children aware that they are entitled to request public information, that is a generational issue. As we have seen in our own surveys, people are not used to request data, and public servants are not used to publish that information, so it is a cultural shift that will require more time. However, at IFAI, we're already considering reuse workshops because it is really a challenge, and the profitability of all these initiatives depends on the fact that people are using the data. If people are not using the data, then all the effort we're doing would make that only Google would be able to profit from that information. So could I ask a question now?
Uh, it's just a comment. Um, Andrew Schwartz, who is well, this is an excellent way of studying things and of approaching a reality that we're all interested in, quite at the intuitive level initially. But my question is the way in which we traditionally conceive social sciences as a copy of science itself, a theoretical speculation that then tests hypothesis. Even physics with the Higgs boson knew about these issues before testing them, but data apparently speak to us before we're able to theoretically speculate. So, what is the risk of data speaking too much to us and that we remain in the world of tendencies, that we get stuck in the world of majorities, means, and other insights, as you call them, um, that may be born from the vision of someone who's asking himself social questions. So basically, to sum up, how can we move away from just data, and how can we relate reasonable? How can we relate reasonably to data when we don't have theoretical frameworks that are not sophisticated enough to consider this data? Could you give us your name, number, phone? Okay, please stand for the video. I'm Ana Lilia Hernandez Rodriguez from the Ministry of Finance of the State of Mexico, and my question is for Eduardo Clark. The problem we face in states of Mexico is that it's difficult to create public policy because we don't have um, we don't have data. The federal government generates information that would be relevant for us, but that information is not uploaded, and therefore we have to request and request and request this information. For instance, remittances, which are published quarterly, we don't have access to this, or direct foreign investment, or the GDP itself. So my question is whether you are considering with your initiative to consult with the states to to ensure that the states can use and take advantage of this information for the creation of public policy. Miss, could you do the same? I'm Monica Velasco, and I'm a researcher here at Infotech. And my question is for Eduardo Clark. On Zapopan, is there a profile of OCSs for the event? And I have other questions, but we want to watch the game, so maybe I'll send it to you by email. So please, just one final round. No particular order. Would you like to begin, Professor? Please. Bueno, al respecto de la pregunta es una pregunta muy buena sobre la prueba de hipótesis y aproximaciones tradicionales a las ciencias sociales. Trataré de contestar brevemente, es una discusión muy larga, pero puntos clave, consideraciones clave. Bueno, los análisis exploratorios y las ciencias sociales tienen una mala reputación, pero es importante notar que esta información que recibimos de redes sociales nos permite controlar el hecho de que estamos viendo miles de variables y podemos ajustar variables claves y pruebas de importancia, sobre todo si estamos viendo, bueno, que seas 100 variables y tienes 0.01, allí puede ser que algo vaya a surgir. Y ese es un punto a considerar. También estas aproximaciones están cambiando las ciencias sociales para que no sean completamente siempre guiadas por hipótesis, sino que creo que de momento una de las mejores aproximaciones sería utilizar una aproximación basada en datos de abajo hacia arriba y también de arriba hacia abajo, en el que cierta teoría guía qué tipo, digamos, de temas se producen con la finalidad de ver con más detalle esto. Y al mismo tiempo, conforme avance nuestra sofisticación de nuestros análisis de abajo hacia arriba, nos dará información que irá más en línea con lo que concebimos normalmente como una teoría. Estamos usando palabras, frases y podemos incrementar la sofisticación y obtener información más sofisticada, pero es las técnicas de inteligencia artificial todavía no están allí, pero creo que con el tiempo lo estarán. Así que creo que está cambiando la forma en que lo estamos haciendo y hay mucho que considerar. Please, Professor Ignacio. I think this is precisely one of the topics, one of the most relevant topics from a theoretical standpoint for social scientists. I consider myself a social scientist. We are currently at a situation, and I suggest that you read a Korean German philosopher called Byung-Chul Han, and this philosopher states in his work that, well, it's becoming popular in political theory that many of the discussions in your question that we are creating a social science without theory, a social science that is abandoning the large encompassing models, and that is also abandoning the intention of explaining the world, why things happen, if there is a cause behind this, in the attempt of social sciences to learn more about the world. So with the extension of big data, we would, in a way, be entering, as Andrew mentioned, in an arena in which we have data, we have tendencies, we can create predictions, but we're not interested why a phenomena occurs. So this is something that's quite latent in the world, and from a politological or sociological viewpoint, and also an economic one, this is something that we need to question in this forum, where perhaps we are discussing these things from a more practical point of view. It would be worth reflecting this, because this reflection has an impact on what we are as individuals, as societies, as people, as a world. So this, in the future, well, we need to try and explain this and reflect on it and to apprehend. So this is something of great depth, and I would hope that you reflected on it. So sorry, I didn't want to skip you, Eduardo. Okay, first of all, thank you for your clarification. And just beginning with the states, it's a current problem. It's a problem we want to solve when we have these types of initiatives. Data, you request it normally through the IFAI. What we want is for the open data policy to convert the IFAI into an institution that only responds when there's an issue on whether the data must be published or not. If data should be public, it should be public from the start. Whether and people should be able to use them, whether they are the government or just general public. Most of the data we produce in the federal government are not published openly, and sometimes they're not even published at all. So this is what we're trying to solve. And second, with regards to Zapopan, the question of what's the profile of the people who are going to sign up for the event. Well, actually, this datathon is open to the general public, and we've had a single people, and Microsoft Research has also signed up. So Google paid close attention to this. So there's no restrictions in terms of age or members per team. So there's a prize. It's $4,000 minus taxes. It's Infotech is a sponsor. Other ways, how do we finance the open data policy? So we invite you to participate. Thank you, Eduardo. Just on the issue of data driving us too much, yes, there's correlation everywhere. There's an important correlation between murders in Britain and the number of people who belong to the Anglican Church, and now also between the arrival of storks and the arrival of babies. So this is nothing new. It's but it's just the size of it. Okay, so sometimes we can say that we're in a jungle. We have a machete, but we have to dare to go into the jungle. So there was a problem of theoretical bias in the past. So there's always been a problem. And third, the good thing of econometrics is that it's always good or easy to destroy a bad model, or whether it predicts out of sample, etc. So there's plenty of techniques. So what we do have to, what we must do is be vigilant and destroy what's bad. So thank you very much. I thank you very much for your work today, not only for the time you spent discussing here, but for the quality of your presentations and the way in which you answered the questions. And I thank the public for their patience, even though we have a game starting, and I saw some people leave. It's about the time. My sister didn't ask who I am. I'm Gabriel Puronci. I'm a professor at the CIDE, and I'm the moderator.